Most people think power is about speaking, or commanding, or being the loudest voice in the room. But the truth? It's about silence. Because words can be ignored, commands can be resisted, noise can be forgotten. But silence, the ability to stay calm, unreadable, and unshakable, that's what makes people lean in. That's what makes them wonder. That's what makes them follow. And here's the uncomfortable part. Silence doesn't look strong. It doesn't look impressive. It doesn't even look powerful. It looks passive. It looks quiet. It looks invisible. But invisible power is the kind that controls everything. And today, you're going to learn the 7 rules that samurai, monks, and masters of discipline used to dominate without saying a word. But before we dive in, do this real quick. Hit subscribe, smash that like button, and in the comments, write the one situation where you talk too much instead of staying silent. Not for the algorithm, but because admitting it changes how your brain treats it. All right, let's begin. Most people think power is about speaking, about commanding, about being the loudest voice in the room. But the truth is far more unsettling. Power is not found in noise. It is not found in endless words. It is not found in the desperate attempt to be heard. Real power is invisible. Real power is silent. And those who master silence, those who learn to control themselves so completely that they no longer need to prove anything, are the ones who shape everything around them. The samurai understood this. For them, silence was not weakness. Silence was a weapon. A warrior who spoke too much revealed his mind, his fears, his doubts. But a warrior who remained silent carried mystery. He carried presence. He carried control. When a samurai entered a room, he did not need to announce himself. His discipline spoke louder than any words. His restraint created tension. His silence commanded respect. Invisible power begins with restraint. It begins with the ability to hold back when every instinct tells you to react. Most people cannot do this. They are slaves to their emotions. They speak when they are angry. They shout when they are insecure. They argue when they feel threatened. And in doing so, they give away their power. They show their weakness. They reveal their hand. But the one who remains silent, the one who does not react, becomes untouchable. Think about it. In any argument, the loudest person is rarely the strongest. The one who shouts, who screams, who demands attention is usually the one who feels powerless. But the one who sits back, who listens, who waits, who speaks only when necessary, that is the person everyone watches. That is the person everyone fears. Silence creates mystery. Mystery creates respect. Respect creates influence. Invisible power is not about hiding. It is about controlling. It is about choosing when to reveal yourself and when to disappear. The samurai called this ma, the space between actions. In combat, the pause before a strike was as important as the strike itself. In life, the pause before a word is as important as the word itself. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is space, and space is control. Zen monks trained for decades in silence. They understood that the mind is a wild animal, constantly chasing thoughts, constantly reacting. To tame it, they sat in stillness. They breathed, they observed, they detached. And in that detachment, they found strength. A monk who can sit for hours without moving, without speaking, without reacting, is not weak. He is powerful beyond measure. He has mastered himself. And the one who masters himself cannot be controlled by anyone else. Most people fear silence. They fear being alone with their thoughts. They fear the judgment of others. They fear the emptiness. So they fill the air with words. They talk endlessly. They explain themselves. They justify themselves. They try to prove their worth. But in doing so, they reveal their insecurity. They show that they cannot endure silence. They show that they cannot endure themselves. Invisible power is uncomfortable because it does not look like power. It does not look glamorous. It does not look impressive. It looks quiet. It looks passive. It looks invisible. But that is the point. The strongest forces in the world are invisible. Gravity is invisible. Time is invisible. The wind is invisible.
and yet they shape everything. Silence works the same way. When you master silence, you master presence. People begin to notice you not because you demand attention, but because you refuse to. They lean in. They wonder what you are thinking. They wonder what you will say. They wonder why you are different. And in that wondering, you gain control. You control their perception. You control their curiosity. You control their respect. Invisible power is built on discipline. Discipline to hold your tongue. Discipline to control your face. Discipline to move slowly, deliberately, without panic. Discipline to disconnect from emotion. Discipline to disappear strategically. Discipline to endure silence when others cannot. This discipline is not easy. It is not natural. It must be trained. It must be forged. The samurai trained every day, not just in combat, but in silence. They meditated. They wrote poetry. They performed rituals. Every act was deliberate. Every act was controlled. They understood that the battlefield was won long before the fight began. It was won in the mind. It was won in silence.
Invisible power is not built in a single day. It is forged over years, through repetition, through endurance, through the quiet rituals that most people dismiss as boring. The samurai did not wake up one morning with unshakable discipline. They built it, brick by brick, moment by moment, silence by silence. And that is the uncomfortable truth. Invisible power is not glamorous. It is not exciting. It is not dramatic. It is relentless. It is predictable. It is boring. But it is also unstoppable. The world worships noise because noise is easy. Anyone can shout. Anyone can argue. Anyone can demand attention. But silence requires strength. Silence requires patience. Silence requires control. And that is why so few people master it. They cannot endure the boredom. They cannot endure the restraint. They cannot endure themselves. But those who can, those who train themselves to sit in silence, to act deliberately, to detach from emotion, become forces that cannot be moved. Think of Miyamoto Musashi, the legendary swordsman. He fought over 60 duels and never lost. But his true weapon was not his sword. His true weapon was his mind. Musashi understood invisible power. He understood that silence creates fear. He understood that restraint creates mystery. He understood that patience wins battles before they begin. He often arrived late to duels, forcing his opponents to wait, to grow anxious, to lose control. His silence was not passive. It was strategic. It was power. Invisible power is not about doing nothing. It is about doing less, but with more control. It is about choosing your actions carefully, deliberately, strategically. The samurai did not waste movements. They did not waste words. They did not waste emotions. Everything was measured. Everything was controlled. Everything was intentional. That is why their presence was so commanding. That is why their silence was so powerful. In modern life, invisible power is rare. We live in a culture of constant noise. Social media rewards shouting. Workplaces reward visibility. Relationships reward endless expression. But beneath the surface, the rules have not changed. The ones who truly control the room are not the ones who speak the most. They are the ones who speak the least. They are the ones who listen. They are the ones who wait. They are the ones who choose silence over noise. Imagine a negotiation. Two sides sit across the table. One side talks endlessly, trying to prove their point, trying to justify their position. The other side sits quietly, listening, observing, waiting. When they finally speak, their words carry weight. Their silence has created tension. Their restraint has created authority. Their presence has created power. That is invisible power in action. Invisible power is also emotional control. Most people are slaves to their emotions. They react instantly to anger, to fear, to insecurity. They lash out. They panic. They crumble. But those who master silence master emotion.
They remain calm when others lose control. They remain neutral when others are consumed by chaos. They remain steady when others collapse. And in that steadiness, they gained control. Zen monks trained this control through meditation. They sat in silence for hours, days, years. They observed their thoughts without reacting. They observed their emotions without attachment. They observed the chaos of the mind until it became still. This training was not easy. It was not glamorous. It was not exciting. But it forged invisible power. It forged minds that could not be shaken. It forged presence that could not be ignored. Invisible power is also about timing. The samurai understood that the pause before a strike was as important as the strike itself. The silence before a word was as important as the word itself. Timing creates tension. Timing creates authority. Timing creates control. Most people rush. They speak too quickly. They act too impulsively. They reveal too much. But those who master timing, those who master silence, control the rhythm of the room. They control the pace of the conversation. They control the flow of power.
Invisible power is not about being invisible forever. It is about choosing when to appear. It is about choosing when to speak. It is about choosing when to act. The samurai did not remain silent always. They spoke when necessary. They acted when necessary. They revealed themselves when necessary. But because they had mastered silence, their words carried more weight. Their actions carried more impact. Their presence carried more authority. In relationships, invisible power creates trust. When you listen more than you speak, people feel heard. When you remain calm in conflict, people feel safe. When you choose silence over argument, people feel respected. Invisible power is not about dominating others. It is about mastering yourself so completely that others cannot help but respect you. In creativity, invisible power fuels ideas. Silence creates space. Space creates thought. Thought creates innovation. Most people drown their minds in noise. They scroll endlessly. They talk endlessly. They consume endlessly. But those who master silence create space for ideas. They create space for inspiration. They create space for creativity. And in that space, they build things that others cannot. Invisible power is also about presence. Presence is not about being seen. It is about being felt. When you walk into a room and say nothing, but everyone notices you, that is presence. When you remain calm while others panic, that is presence. When you choose silence over noise, that is presence. Presence is invisible power made visible. Presence is silence turned into influence. Presence is control without words. But invisible power must be used wisely. Silence can be misused. Silence can be manipulative. Silence can be deceptive. True invisible power is ethical. It is disciplined. It is controlled. It is used to create respect, not fear. It is used to create trust, not manipulation. It is used to create influence, not domination. The samurai understood this. Their silence was not cruelty. It was discipline. Their restraint was not manipulation. It was mastery. Their presence was not deception. It was control. Invisible power is uncomfortable because it does not look like power. It does not look glamorous. It does not look impressive. It looks quiet. It looks passive. It looks invisible. But that is the point. The strongest forces in the world are invisible. Gravity is invisible. Time is invisible. The wind is invisible. And yet they shape everything. Silence works the same way. When you master silence, you master yourself. When you master yourself, you master presence. When you master presence, you master influence. And when you master influence, you master power. Invisible power is the highest form of control because it does not need to be seen. It does not need to be heard. It does not need to be proven. It simply exists.
and in existing, it shapes everything. So train yourself to endure silence. Train yourself to detach from emotion. Train yourself to move slowly, deliberately. Train yourself to observe everything. Train yourself to disappear strategically. Train yourself to speak only when necessary. Train yourself to master presence. Train yourself to master yourself. And in doing so, you will build invisible power. Invisible power is not about being loud. It is not about being seen. It is not about being heard. It is about being felt. It is about being respected. It is about being unshakable. It is about being untouchable. It is about being invisible, yet controlling everything.
Invisible power is not a trick. It is not a performance. It is not something you put on like a mask. It is something you become. It is something you embody. It is something that radiates from the inside out. The samurai did not pretend to be disciplined. They lived discipline. They breathed discipline. They became discipline. And because of that, their silence was not empty. It was full of presence, full of control, full of power. When you master invisible power, you stop chasing validation. You stop chasing recognition. You stop chasing applause. You no longer need the world to notice you because you notice yourself. You no longer need the world to respect you because you respect yourself. You no longer need the world to control you because you control yourself. And paradoxically, when you stop chasing recognition, recognition comes. When you stop chasing respect, respect arrives. When you stop chasing control, control becomes yours. Invisible power is not about hiding from the world. It is about standing in the world without being shaken by it. It is about walking into chaos and remaining calm. It is about facing noise and remaining silent. It is about enduring pressure and remaining steady. It is about being the eye of the storm. The storm rages around you, but you remain still. The world screams around you, but you remain silent. The chaos consumes others, but you remain untouchable. That is invisible power. Consider the Zen concept of mushin, the mind without thought. Mushin is not emptiness, it is clarity. It is freedom from distraction. It is freedom from reaction. It is freedom from fear. A warrior in mushin does not hesitate. He does not panic. He does not doubt. He simply acts. His silence is not passive. It is active. It is the silence of a mind that has been mastered. It is the silence of a mind that cannot be shaken. Invisible power is also about endurance. Most people can remain silent for a moment. Most people can remain calm for a day. Most people can remain disciplined for a week. But invisible power requires endurance. It requires silence over years. It requires restraint over decades. It requires discipline over a lifetime. The samurai trained every day, not because they enjoyed it, but because they understood endurance. They understood that invisible power is not built in moments, it is built in lifetimes. Endurance is uncomfortable, it is boring, it is repetitive, it is relentless, but it is also unstoppable. Talent fades, luck runs out, timing shifts, but endurance remains. And invisible power is endurance made visible. It is the ability to keep moving when everyone else stops. It is the ability to keep training when everyone else quits. It is the ability to keep enduring when everyone else collapses. That is why invisible power is rare. That is why invisible power is feared. That is why invisible power controls everything. Invisible power is also about detachment. Detachment does not mean indifference. It does not mean apathy. It does not mean coldness. It means freedom. Freedom from being controlled by emotions. Freedom from being controlled by opinions. Freedom from being controlled by noise. The samurai practiced detachment because they understood that attachment creates weakness.
Attachment to fear creates hesitation. Attachment to anger creates recklessness. Attachment to pride creates blindness. But detachment creates clarity. Detachment creates control. Detachment creates invisible power. In modern life, detachment is more important than ever. We are surrounded by noise. Social media demands reaction. News demands outrage. Work demands urgency. Relationships demand constant expression. But invisible power requires detachment. It requires the ability to step back. It requires the ability to observe without reacting. It requires the ability to remain calm in the face of chaos. It requires the ability to remain silent in the face of noise. And when you master detachment, you master invisible power.
Invisible power is also about presence. Presence is not about being seen. It is about being felt. Presence is not about being loud. It is about being silent. Presence is not about demanding attention. It is about commanding respect. Presence is invisible power made visible. Presence is silence turned into influence. Presence is control without words. The samurai understood presence. They understood that their silence created tension. They understood that their restraint created mystery. They understood that their discipline created authority. And because of that, their presence was undeniable. Presence is built through discipline. Discipline in movement, discipline in speech, discipline in emotion, discipline in silence. When you move slowly, deliberately, with control, you create presence. When you speak rarely, carefully, with intention, you create presence. When you control your emotions, your face, your reactions, you create presence. Presence is not about being noticed. It is about being respected. Presence is not about being loud. It is about being powerful. Presence is invisible power embodied. Invisible power is also about timing. Timing is silence turned into rhythm. Timing is restraint turned into strategy. Timing is patience turned into victory. The samurai understood timing. They understood that the pause before a strike was as important as the strike itself. They understood that the silence before a word was as important as the word itself. They understood that timing creates tension. Timing creates authority. Timing creates control. And those who master timing master invisible power. In modern life, timing is everything. In business, the one who waits often wins negotiations. In relationships, the one who pauses often gains trust. In creativity, the one who endures silence often finds inspiration. Timing is invisible power in motion. Timing is silence turned into influence. Timing is control turned into victory. Invisible power is not easy. It is not natural. It is not glamorous. It is not exciting. It is boring. It is repetitive. It is relentless. But it is also unstoppable. It is also undeniable. It is also unshakable. And that is why it is rare. That is why it is feared. That is why it controls everything. So train yourself. Train yourself to endure silence. Train yourself to detach from emotion. Train yourself to move slowly, deliberately. Train yourself to observe everything. Train yourself to disappear strategically. Train yourself to speak only when necessary. Train yourself to master presence. Train yourself to master timing. Train yourself to master yourself. And in doing so, you will build invisible power. Invisible power is not about being loud. It is not about being seen. It is not about being heard. It is about being felt. It is about being unshakable. It is about being untouchable.
It is about being invisible, yet controlling everything.